For those of you that I didn't meet on the way in, my name is Tom Keating. I run the Financial Crime and Security Studies program at RUSI. And it has been our very great pleasure over the last 10 days to have with us first in Brussels and now this week in London, what we refer to as our cohort from Ukraine, but we should be more specific, which is a group of investigative journalists and anti-corruption civil society activists, both from Kyiv and a number of the regions of Ukraine. And the reason that they joined us in Brussels and they are joining us here in London this week is that together with Alexei, who's here in the front row, who hopefully you will have a chance to meet later on, who is the CEO of BRDO, we have been working together thinking about the important matter of reconstruction in Ukraine. Now, lots of people are thinking about that. Indeed, there is an entire British government unit preparing a conference for June on that very subject. The specific issue that we have been trying to think about is not so much the importance of transparent procurement and all these matters which are central to any reconstruction process and indeed central to the failure of many reconstruction processes if they're not properly administered. But what we are thinking about is there will be financial flows, illicit financial flows that stem from reconstruction. And so what interests us is how prepared is the financial system in Ukraine? How prepared are the authorities in Ukraine? How prepared is the international community? We do not want in 5 years' time to see money that should have been an important part of the reconstruction of Ukraine rocking up in some of the houses not far from here, where so much money has turned up and been invested by ne'er-do-wells over the last 25 years. So this is what we're thinking about. And as part of that, working with Alexei and his colleagues, we brought together a very experienced group to visit from Ukraine, who you'll hear from this morning. So that is pretty much everything from me. What I would say is that we have 11 visitors from Ukraine. Everyone will stay behind afterwards for coffee and whatever croissants are left and so on. So do please take the opportunity to meet them, introduce yourselves and to hear what they are doing. Now, there's one other person here before I hand over who we are delighted to welcome, Oliver Bullough. Many of you will know Oliver. It was actually Ukraine that brought Oliver and I together originally in a cafe off Carnaby Street. What's the connection? I think the connection was Anne Applebaum, who, as Oliver was starting his work in the world of corruption, and I approached Anne and tried to get a meeting with her, and she bounced me off onto Oliver and said, "You'll find Oliver much more interesting. I'll leave you to judge whether she was right or not." And that's how we got to know each other when he was writing Moneyland, and of course has just published the important Butler to the world. Oliver will chair the discussion this morning, and I will pass to Oliver to introduce our guests. And again, do please engage in the conversation. Our friends have lots of stories to tell, as we've discovered over the last 10 days, but answering your questions will, of course, help the conversation be relevant. So with that, I am going to pass to Oliver. Sir.
Thanks very much, Tom. Anne Applebaum's loss was very much my gain. I'm very pleased to be here. As Tom was saying, I'm a journalist and author. I specialize in writing about financial crime, often with a connection to the former Soviet Union. I have done lots of work in Ukraine over the years, as well as in Russia and other countries of the region. I think that Ukraine's great strength is its citizens. Rather, I don't just mean its people, I mean its citizens, the willingness of Ukrainians to display a deep patriotism, not just, as we've seen in its military forces, who have surprised everyone by the strength of their resistance, but also in its civil society, which since the Maidan revolution of 2014, and in fact since long before that, have been working to improve their country, often in the teeth of strong opposition from their own government. Ukrainians often say they're battling on two fronts, against Russia on one front and against corruption at home. And so I think what we're going to be looking to talk about today is the second front. How do we make sure that Ukraine emerges from this horrible war stronger, more democratic, and more resilient against both the internal and the external threat? In my spare time, part of the things I do with my spare time is running or helping to run the kleptocracy tours. Those of you who have not been privileged to join a kleptocracy tour, it's a bus tour modeled on the Hollywood tours that you can do in California. You drive people around West London or sometimes North London if the traffic allows, pointing out mansions that belong to oligarchs and kleptocrats in this fair city of ours. One of our favorites, if favorite is the word I'm looking for, is the tube station belonging to Dmitry Firtash, which he bought with money he earned from overcharging the Ukrainians for gas. There's also London's most expensive apartment belonging to Rinat Akhmetov, another wealthy Ukrainian, and a very large property on Trafalgar Square belonging to other Ukrainians. This is a city that has become part of the reason we have become so rich is because the Ukrainians have remained poor. It is incredibly important in the reconstruction process that stops, that the money that is sent to Ukraine stays in Ukraine and helps to build a more resilient society rather than helping to enrich estate agents in London, as it has done in the past. I'm really, really pleased to be sitting here with these two fabulous journalists who are going to be telling us about life in Ukraine and what they are hoping for from us. To my far left, to your far right, Liubov Velychko, freelancer who's worked as a journalist for 15 years and is part of the team, the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, the OCCRP. I'm sure many of you know their work. If you don't, you need to. And next to me, Anna Miranyuk, also has worked with the OCCRP and is an investigative journalist for the Kyiv Independent, which, if you don't follow on Twitter or on all your socials, you're also missing out. I think to start, just to understand the role that oligarchs have played in Ukraine, the dominant role they've played in public discussion, I wonder whether, Anna, you could tell us a little bit about the story of the Kyiv Post, the newspaper that you used to work for, which I think many of us were accustomed to getting our English language news from Ukraine from, but perhaps not so much anymore.
Sure, Oliver. Hello, everybody. So the Kyiv Post I'm talking to the Kyiv Post in the past tense because it ceased operations in 2021 in November when the oligarch owner who acquired the newspaper in 2018, Adnan Kiban, Ukrainian construction tycoon, decided on one Monday morning that the paper should cease operations. Before that, for 26 years, the paper served as a primary English language source of information about Ukraine on the ground for the entire war. We were quite decent and very critical to the establishment, didn't take any compromises. And when the oligarch bought the newspaper, he didn't really try to influence it anyhow, until he did, as oligarchs do. So when he did, he tried to impose some censorship over us, which we didn't really take well. We protested, and then he fired the entire team with any prior notice. So we were a little bit disappointed, of course, but we decided not to be and opened the Kyiv Independent instead. But I think an interesting aspect to this story is why he did it. Why he did it is because at the time, Ukraine's general prosecutor was Irina Venediktova, an appointee of Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, part of his team, who, as far as we know, tried to express her. I'm trying to be polite. 1 second.
Don't be polite.
Express her disappointment about the coverage of the Kyiv Post about her work. So what Kyiv Post did, the Kyiv Post, my colleagues, published 2 articles, quite critical, which were, well, let's put it this way, an audit of her work. So they just took the most vital cases about corruption within Ukraine and tried to assess whether the prosecution was successful, how the case is developed, whether there was any, progress in terms of investigation, and found that there wasn't. And she wasn't happy about these stories, and she tried to, reach out, as far as we know, to the owner and the editor-in-chief, telling them that she doesn't like the way she's portrayed in these stories. And that, as we know, allegedly led to him being, the oligarch, being irritated with our team and firing us, and then bringing on board a loyal team. So you can still find the Kyiv Post online, not in print anymore, but you can still find the Kyiv Post online. But well, I won't speak about the Kyiv Post. I will just say it's up to you to compare the Kyiv Post to the Kyiv Independent, and yes, use your own judgment. But I would highly recommend the Kyiv Independent, because I think we're doing a good job. We're independent. You know, yeah, we weren't very creative about the name. Sorry about that. But well, still, the name speaks for itself, right? What we did, we just started engaging with our community, and we have a Patreon where people support us. Please do if you don't. And that is basically how we survive. We don't have any oligarch backing us. It didn't work in the past, and it won't. So that's not the strategy we no longer rely on. We are totally independent. Our money comes from our readership, from our supporters, from our audience, some grants, but primarily the source of our existence, something that helps us running, is our audience. So please join.
So that's the difficulties of working as an independent journalist in Kyiv in the past. But I think it would be good to hear from you, Liubov, if you would, about how it's been in the last year working as a journalist in situations of war. How have you found the stories you've been working on, and how have they been received?
Good morning to everyone. I want to say that I'm happy to talk to you right now. It's a very big honor for me. My English is not so well as Anna's. That is why when you will see some pauses, stupid, just try to remember English words. So when you ask about 2 past years, I must admit that the war is for 8 years. So, and all these 8 years, I was covering not only war, but corruption. And talking about Zelensky, I had problems with him and his team and our government, because they really didn't like what I wrote about the so-called reforms. But nice news are that after the beginning of the war, Zelensky understood that he really can become Ukrainians' copy of Churchill, and he liked the role of being hero. And this really inspires him to be more active in to fight the corruption. Yes, and I feel it as a journalist. Why? Because right now, during the past year, when I'm writing about corruption, I see a very fast reaction on my investigations. And this is very cool, because before that, I felt that I have like 50% that the reaction will be, and I couldn't even explain, and I didn't know if it will be fast or slow. But right now, after each my investigation, sometimes even the next day, I have the feedback from my heroes. Heroes, you understand what I mean? And I feel like I'm a teacher who is talking to a child. And the child tries to do it best to like make it behavior much better. So during the last year, I visited so many government people in their cabinets. And can you imagine the situation when I'm coming to the interview of the head of some like government institution, opening the door and see that he's sitting not alone, but with the team of 10 people, with a package of documents, and are ready to spend as much time as I need, like hours, to explain me what is really going on, and to listen to me, to my point, that what can we do to make with this problem. This is amazing. I'm telling to you this, and I still is a little bit like in happy. I'm just feel happy about this, that I can tell you this sincerely, you see, because I can't imagine the same situation more than 1 or 2 years ago. After my investigation, I could have threats. There were informational companies against me, like they paid money to write something bad about me as a journalist. And it was very dirty stories all the time. And I just even get used to it. But right now, I see that our politicians, they are really understood that they are, if they will be do the same what they did before the war, if they will be involved in corruption, Ukrainian society will not forgive them, because Ukrainian society also became more sensitive to corruption. And right now, if we see some dirty story, you can't imagine what is next in social media and in media, and in general, Ukrainians are all together starting like make a like hate speech program. And so after that, politicians understand that I don't want to be the one who will be beaten for all the society. Because right now, the question which is in the air in Ukrainian society right now is, what are you, it's a question to a politician, what are you doing during the war? How dare you stealing money when we are dying, trying to protect you in your comfortable chair? And after the war, saying about reconstruction, the question will be, what have you done for Ukrainians? What have you done to make Ukraine, to reconstruct Ukraine, to make it beautiful? Because from the first days of the war, when the situation was just horrible, like first week, Zelensky already told in his speeches that Ukrainians, we will rebuild everything. Our Ukrainian, it will be much more beautiful than it is now. And right now, all Ukrainians are really inspired about this. We are really not only waiting for the victory, but we are waiting for the moment when we can do like this and do something to rebuild our beautiful Ukraine. We are inspired by European and Great Britain projects. We are making pictures of those amazing, beautiful buildings and bridges and everything. We want to see the same in Ukraine, because for tens of years, we have that gray Soviet buildings, and we do not like them actually, because those buildings, they were rebuilt also after the, but they were horrible, like very cheap and very thin walls. And you know, it's not like in amazing like Brussels or London, when you are walking down the street with this space, and when you look at this, you want to live in the same streets but in Ukraine. So I will stop myself because I'm afraid that I will talk too long.
Liubov, you mentioned some stories you'd been working on this year about corruption. Obviously, corruption hasn't ended. Could you share maybe one story about what it has looked like this year and what you reported on and what the response of the authorities was to that specific story?
Yes. Right now, when I'm writing about corruption, it's mostly about the topic of war, because. And I wrote the story about the problem on the border when volunteers can't buy and bring to Ukraine specific electronic devices for our drones, like war birds, as we call them. And I told that the reason is why volunteers can't bring them here is a corruption in the specific government institution, a Spec Techno Export. And I claimed the head of this institution that he did nothing during 11 months of the war to deal with this problem, just taking money for working with companies and certain people who is also interested in bringing those goods to Ukraine. So the second day after the investigation was published, the chief of Spectechno Export called me and asked me to visit him, and he started to talk to me and other volunteers and did it publicly. And so in result, they closed this problem. So right now it is like everything is okay. And this is like the example how Ukrainian media are strong right now. We really feel that we are strong. Don't you think so?
Anna, do you share this opinion?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that there are cases like Liubov's and that there is reaction. And I also know about many other cases. There was a huge scandal involving food purchase and by the Ministry of Defense, and there was also a reaction to that. However, my personal journalistic experience is a little bit, well, it contradicts what Liubov just described, because in the story that I broke in summer, in August and November, the Kyiv Independent published two big stories about the alleged mismanagement, abuse of power, various misconduct in the International Legion of Ukraine, which is a formation within the Ukrainian military, specifically designed for foreign fighters who are eager to defend Ukraine. So basically, we uncovered that there were orders to go, orders by commanders to legionnaires to go on, so to say, suicide missions, to loot shops. The soldiers we interviewed accused the leadership of stealing of small arms and light weapons, etc., etc. So when these stories were published, first story published in August, it didn't lead to any reaction, unfortunately. In Ukraine. But we later learned that one of the masterminds actually attracted the attention of Polish prosecution. I'll be brief. So one of the commanders that we uncovered being allegedly involved in all sorts of abuse of power was a Polish criminal convicted, charged with over 70 crimes, including stabbing, in Poland. Who is hiding in Ukraine. And when we kind of found him serving there, Polish prosecutors got interested in these findings. Ukrainians too, to an extent. So there are investigations in Special Military Prosecutor's Office, as well as SBU, which is Ukraine State Security Service. And that's it as far as, oh yeah. And after the second story was published, military intelligence, which oversees this wing of the International Legion, where this Polish fraudster / gangster serves and where the alleged misconduct took place, they told us that they would launch an investigation, an internal investigation into our findings, because we came to them, obviously, laying out our questions before them and asking them to comment. So they were like, okay, we won't comment, but we will start an internal investigation. So cut the long story short, the internal investigation lasted for 3 weeks. The results of the investigations are unknown because it's state secret. So no, we don't know what is going on with this case. And all the relevant law enforcement agencies, which I just mentioned, also told us that they cannot comment on their findings because it's state secret. But the Polish fraudster is still there, according to our sources, still serving right now in the Donbass, if I'm not mistaken. And well, all of the alleged abuses of power and mismanagement are still ongoing. So that is something that makes me really disappointed when we are talking about the results of the investigative journalism, because that is a negative case, which I wanted to highlight. However, Simultaneously, as I already said, Defense Ministry did react to the huge food scandal that took place and did address the criticism coming from civil society, think tankers, and journalists. There were actually three big investigative stories done by three different investigative teams within Ukraine, talking about inflated food prices. So basically, the Ministry of Defense purchased food for the army at prices which were from 2 to 3 times higher than market. And the ministry revoked these contracts and signed new ones. Well, basically, yes, there was a reaction, which was a good sign. But unfortunately, it's not the case every single time. But the good thing is that some criticism is being addressed and some stories of investigative journalists do bring results.
One of the really positive achievements I think Ukrainians have made in tackling corruption has been about transparency in public institutions. And I'm not sure there is sufficient appreciation in the West of the progress Ukraine has made. Ukraine is, in fact, considerably in advance of quite a lot of Western countries, if not all Western countries, on many of these things. So, Liubov, can you talk a little bit about the tools available for you? If you were looking for, say, procurement corruption or government corruption, a little bit about what you'd have available just to look that up.
Right now or before the war?
Well, before the war, yeah, because obviously things have changed a little bit, but it is relevant to talking about reconstruction.
Okay, 2 points. I was always talking to my colleagues from abroad about how they work on their area. And after our conversations, I always was thinking, wow, I'm so lucky I'm working in Ukraine as a journalist, because actually Ukrainian laws about media, they are one of the best in Europe, or not to say the best. For example, we can get information from the officials during 5 days. We're writing the letter and they answer during 5 days. And comparing to other countries, I remember how I made transborder investigation. One of the countries I touched was Great Britain. So to get the information from the Ministry of Ecology of Great Britain, I'm sorry, I might not correctly say the official name. So to get the information, I spent 2.5 months. Yes. And this is the first point, the laws that are very nice in Ukraine. The second point is that really during the last 10 years, our system became more transparent. And that is why just sitting at home, I can search how many money our government spent for this certain school in the village in like Western Ukraine. And I can see all the documents that was used for it, contracts. It's amazing. It's very easy. You see, if you are even lazy journalist, you can do nice investigations. Yeah, because 10 years ago, to get this information, I wrote on the paper like on questions to the Ministry of Justice, went with my legs to the Ministry of Justice, put it in the post box, and like during 1 month, they could say that, oh, the director of the company you're asking for is like this. Thank you so much. In a month that I get this very useful information. Right now, I can get this information by 2 seconds, you see, and I can see the beneficial owner of the company, even if it is Ukrainian companies owners are on Cyprus, you see. Our registers are so transparent that I see who is the real owner of this company. And by the way, it was made like a few years ago, yes, about the beneficial owner, yes or not? Yeah. Before that, we could see only that Cyprus company is the owner of this company. Right now, we see all the structure of the companies. So, and in Ukraine, we also have hundreds of open registered data, and it's like to be a good journalist, you just have to even not to go to the university, but to visit some trainings to understand which data you have. And for example, I have the Word document, I click on it and I see 10 pages of links of links to the registers. It is written like register where you can get information about medicine, register where you can get information about court cases, like 10 pages. I don't remember how many links do I have, but you see, when you are trying to be the best journalist, you're clicking on all links and searching information everywhere. If you are just average journalist, you click on 10 links and still your journalist work will be nice because you will get so much information that you couldn't get 10 years ago.
Anna, one area where Ukraine has been less good is in judicial reform. Judges remain.
I wish you asked me about open data.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, you get the bad one. Judges remain a problem, right?
Yeah, but open data is.
Do we have open judges?
Some of them
Yeah.
are open to different things. I would put it this way.
Yes. It is actually interesting. I think judges are a very interesting example of a well-intentioned but badly designed reform. It was with pressure from the West that judges should be independent in the late 1990s, and they became independent to take as much money from anyone as they wanted and did so very happily and almost immediately.
Yeah. So there are a few kind of unfortunate indicators of some reforms not going as well as Ukraine might have envisioned. So first is, I guess, the presence of Oleg Tatarov, who is Deputy Chief of Staff of President Zelensky's office, and quite a notorious figure, accused of corruption, charged with bribery case, and well, basically his appointment to the president's office evoked fierce criticism in Ukrainian civil society, among journalists too, but why I'm saying that it's an indicator of the tolerance of corruption is because the reaction didn't follow, something that we've just discussed, that there are cases where there is reaction and there are cases where there is none. And this is the very case where there was no reaction whatsoever, even despite quite a harsh criticism. President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, was asked this question plenty of times about, so when are you gonna hire him if you already, fire him if you already hired him? And he couldn't really provide journalists with a concrete answer to that. So that is one thing, that one person that is perceived as well, not decent, is still very close to President Zelensky serving in his office. That's one point. Another point is judges. Basically, what is happening with the judicial reform? Good question. It's ongoing. Let's put it this way. It's not as bad as it was, and there were a few good signs too. For example, the most notorious court in Ukraine, which is administrative, administrative court. The name is in Ukrainian is a little bit longer, but yeah, basically Kyiv Administrative Court, where the head of this court, Pavlovov, was, well, so this court was, you know, to explain this in short, it was like a state within the state. It was the court where they wrote rules for themselves and did whatever they want. There was absolute impunity. They did whatever they want to do, absolutely corrupt. And then at some point, they were bugged. And Ukrainian anti-corruption law enforcement started listening to what they were saying. And then some of these conversations leaked to journalists. If you have a chance at some point, follow Ukrainian journalistic investigations and, you know, just listen to some conversations. it's worth it. This case really illustrates how some of the Ukrainian courts, well, specifically this one, was rooted with corruption. Good thing is that, well, the head of the court is no longer there. He was also sanctioned by the United States. Basically there is an attempt right now to eliminate this corruption there. Separately, to actually make the reform, to put the reform on track, there was a new there was a division created, which was called High Council of Judges. So basically, this is the institution that is designed to hire and fire judges, and they are in place to assess how the judges do their work, whether they are following all the procedures, whether they're corrupt or not, and how they work. So yes, this assessment, this commission has recently been finalized in terms of its structure and form, and they're working. So the reform is ongoing, not finalized yet, but I think there are good signs already. And if we're comparing to, well, the administrative court crisis happened actually way before the Russian full-scale invasion, and back then it was a very, very big deal. And back then it was very critical for Ukraine's democratic society and, you know, survival as a democracy. I think there were some good solutions in place at the time. Zelensky did address that. He tried to, you know, to mitigate the issue and also help to resolve the crisis. There was a decision made by him, you know, for the court to also cease operations. So I guess we can say that the reform is, yes, partially achieved, partially not, but still ongoing. But yeah, I guess we will see how it goes within time. But yet I won't say that it's a failure, for sure.
I want to make sure that people here have time to ask questions. So just very last quickly from me. There's been lots of, obviously, military assistance, financial assistance, diplomatic assistance from the UK, the Ukraine in the last year. What more would you like? What would be, in terms of when the war is won, what would you like to see from Britain to help Ukraine to build a more resilient, more democratic future with houses like in Brussels?
Good news is that in Ukraine, decision makers are usual people. Like we, even if a man in a village feels like he is a king in this country, you see, after the revolution of dignity, we really felt this feeling. We understood that we are making our decision. Politicians, they have like a document that he's people's deputies, he did sitting in Verkhovna Rada, but we don't have that like fear of talking to this politician, saying what we really think. We are not so diplomatic as British people, actually. Ukrainians are used to yell on their politicians all the time. So politicians are threatened by Ukrainians. So the
Civil society is vibrant, I would say.
So what we need from you is to talk more with civil society and media, to invite more civil society members and journalists to European Union, to Great Britain, and to make connections with us. Because, you know, our politicians, they are still politicians. They are trying to cheat us, like saying, oh, I just visited London, so I was asked to do this and this. But actually, he wasn't asked this and this. He just translated into a language which is useful for him to say to civil society and media officially. So if we will have more connections with you, I mean civil society, NGOs and medias, so we can understand clearly what is going on here, what do you want from us, and to inform you what is the situation in Ukraine. So it will be a more truthful situation. And don't worry, if we will know what is going on, we will go back to Ukraine and talk to politicians, and we'll push them very much to do what we really need.
So I think what we might call in bureaucracy is prolonged stakeholder engagement in the reconstruction process. Anna, do you have, apart from more engagement with civil society and the media from in the West, what would be your on your wish list?
Well, my wish list right now involves fighter jets, to be honest, on the top of it. But if we're talking about media,
fighter jets, tanks, missiles. This is given.
Okay.
Artillery shells.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, what I'm wishing for? In Ukraine, I guess right now I wish for greater transparency, which is already in place. And now I'm gonna add a little bit to what Liuba said on open data. It's actually incredible how fast Ukraine achieved so many successes in terms of transparency and open data. There are so many great tools that provide you with all the possible opportunities to look at the bidders, the documentations, at public procurement system tools, also have the access to various registries. There are so many sources of public data in Ukraine. I'm really proud that we have that, and I think that is something that the rest of the world can learn from Ukraine. I think our digital reform actually is amazing and great. I'm running out of words to describe it, but I think it's something to look into, because when we are criticizing Ukraine for something like, police reform, judicial reform, which was quite questionable, etc., there is something to actually on the very positive side of things that we can learn from, digital reform, which was something really, really outstanding. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think we have just over a quarter of an hour left. I'm sure lots of people have questions. If you feel like identifying yourselves, please do. If you don't, also please don't. We have a microphone here. Yes, how about this gentleman?
Great. Craig Oliphant from the Foreign Policy Centre, and thank you, Anna and Liuba, for the incredibly important work you do and the coverage you provide. I had a couple of questions, if I may, and you touched upon the issue of procurement. I wondered if you could say a bit more about the reported sort of personnel changes in the Ministry of Defence. And I'm thinking specifically a few months ago, the initial reports that Minister Reznikov was going to be replaced, and then that seemed to be reversed, but anything on that background would be interesting for us. And I suppose a very specific procurement issue that has struck here, seems to me, is that volunteers, Ukrainian soldiers, in some cases have had to buy their own protective armor, bulletproof jackets, because what they were issued with wouldn't actually deflect shrapnel, let alone a bullet. But just that specific area as well, and what kind of resonance that's had in society as you see it. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will take the first question, and then Liuba will take the second one. When we're talking about Reznikov, right? So the boat scandal evoked some criticism, and there were rumors spread that Reznikov would be replaced. Also, at the very same time, I don't think it was, well, yeah, it wasn't even rumors. David Arahamia, head of Servant of the People faction in the parliament, openly said on his Telegram channel, we are going to replace Reznikov. And then I think there was a weekend, and then on Monday, there was a U-turn suddenly. What happened? The rumor said that instead of Reznikov as a Minister of Defense, Kyrylo Budanov, who is currently Ukraine's head of military intelligence, will, step into the shoes of defense minister. But there were a few problems with that, because as far as I remember, Ukrainian legislation doesn't really allow not a civilian person to be in the seat of the defense minister. But that was not even the greatest problem, because during martial law they could have played with this. For some reason they just decided not to. I don't have any sources within president's office to tell you why. I don't even, well, I'm not sure that they themselves, well, in any case, I won't speculate on that. We don't know why they decided not to substitute Reznikov, but there are rumors and there are some sources that told me that he will be there for some time, and then maybe in a couple of months we could see him leaving, but for another ministry. So as far as I know, again, judging by the information that came from sources, the president's administration is actually quite happy with Reznikov's work. So there is no internal conflict to my knowledge there. And speaking about the Ministry of Defense, they also they addressed the criticism by different means. So they actually fired at least two heads of departments, one of which was the one who signed the contract on food procurement, and also there were two commissions created on trying to kind of find a way to reform and to find the new approach on how to actually make food procurement transparent. Because right now the problem is, and we're once again returning to the issue of transparency and open data. Well, the data which involves the military and army isn't really transparent at the moment for quite obvious reasons. However, civil society right now is actually actively lobbying for at least food prices to be transparent and open, because that is not a secret information, what our military eats and what a potato costs, or I don't know, a tomato, right? That is not top secret and shouldn't be. So I guess that is basically what this commission is currently working on, to try to make prices open, so we can see the bidders, the companies that are making their suggestions and their offers on food prices, and if the contracts that were where the prices were inflated were made for a year, now this period was shortened for 3 months. So I guess, well, right now the ministry is being reformed within. As I said, there were some heads of departments fired. Reznikov is still there, but he's trying to find a new way to make the ministry more transparent in terms of procurement.
Well,
Yes.
body armor.
Your second question. I want you to understand how did Ukrainians felt in the first days of war. The first thing that we are thinking about, not to lose our country in those first 3 days, yes, as Kremlin was dreaming of. So we didn't think about like corruption. We were trying to think only about our survival, yes. And what we started to do is to trying to find all the stuff what we need for our soldiers. Of course, officially we didn't have the enough amount of it, and we were very angry on upper government that it didn't buy before the war that all stuff that we needed. So government guys, they of course understood that Ukrainians they are so evil on them, they can just, I'm sorry.
There was frustration.
Emotions, excuse me. They understood that Ukrainians are so evil that we need to somehow to deal with them. And what government guys did, they closed their eyes on the borders. So there was a joke in volunteer sphere that the first months of war, it was possible to bring nuclear weapon to Ukraine and no one.
They didn't do it.
But
It's just a joke.
but there was a possibility, you see?
Still not used.
Theoretical.
Yeah.
Theoretical.
Very theoretical. No practical use of it.
Yeah, and I just want, I just want to give, and Ukraine was is very thankful to other states that they are also actually closed eyes and just get our volunteers to bring from abroad those stuff we needed. So one of the articles about volunteers I wrote was about a granny, 70 years old woman from USA. You can't believe it, but this is true. She brought 62, what is it?
Bags.
62 bags with
Body armor?
body art from USA to Ukraine with no documents on it. USA, as you know, they are very strict about this official stuff, but they just, when they saw what she's gathering and she explained where she's going to bring it, they said, okay, go. And so Granny took these packages and bring it to Ukraine. This sounds right now amazing. What governments did next, they wanted to make the process of bringing those stuff from abroad to Ukraine as simply as it possible. So the next steps were official documents when they are saying that this, and this, and lots of stuff you can bring very easily. So right now we can do the same what we did on the first months of the war, but officially. Of course, sometimes there are some just questions from volunteers. Oh, we need also this thing in the list of the stuff we need to bring in Ukraine with no problems. And the government said, okay, we'll put it in the list. So this dialogue is very effective, and that is why we really survived. Did I answer your question? Yes.
Yes, there's a lady there.
Thank you very much. Firstly, really interesting talk, and it's so lovely to see two women giving this talk as well, so thank you. My question is actually around public perception of corruption. So I'd be really interested to know if you've noticed any changes in the public perception, attitudes and reactions to corruption as a result of the war. So looking at what that looked like maybe before the war started, and whether you've seen any changes in that public perception as a result of Russia's attack.
You mean public perception of the prevalence of corruption?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Anna,
I'll be brief. I think people in Ukraine, generally speaking, are even more frustrated when there are cases of corruption being reported about, because, well, while Russia is attacking Ukraine with missiles and shells, when at the very same time, our society sees some reports on, some corrupt politician, trying to steal on procurement of, say, body armor. That's an imaginary story, and that's not a specific case. Well, I guess that frustrates a lot. I can tell by, judging from my Facebook feed and my conversations with friends, some of which are volunteers, and they are trying really to help Ukraine and to crowdfund money for soldiers. So I guess the corruption right now frustrates way more than the corruption frustrated Ukrainians before Russian full-scale invasion, because right now it feels even more cynical than ever to do something or to do any bad deed to the country which is already struggling.
I'm just behind you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Pugh. I'm a lawyer and academic, and I had the privilege of working in Ukraine in the 90s, early 90s in Poltava for, I should say, Dobry Ranek, to Poltava Petroleum Company. So there was a lot of, so I've got one observation and one question. So there was a lot of corruption at the time, and everyone was talking about a transition of Ukraine. It would take 5 years until Ukraine became like the West. But I suppose as journalists, I would make an observation that you have a responsibility to hold the West to account as well, because you had people like Kuchma and many other politicians as well who really took a lot of money from Ukraine. And the West, some countries in the West worked with people like Kuchma and also some Western organizations also went in. And I think it's really important that you shine the light on the bad behavior of Western organizations. As Oliver said, people are starting to focus on Ukraine as the reconstruction, and not only in terms of financial support, but also as a return on investment. And it takes two to tango, and there will be private banks and other organizations going in specifically with the purpose of looking to either win the tenders in the ways that you know, the wrong ways that they use, or the private bankers just going in there to make contacts with influential.
I have a slight eye on the clock, so
yeah,
please.
Great. So that's just an observation. But my question for you is really, do you think you've got a responsibility to influence Russians? Some people think it's Putin's war, but other people think it's Russia's war, and that there's a sizable proportion of the Russian population who are supporting the war. Do you think you can have a role to shine the light of truth on the terrible things that Russia is doing in the war, to make changes with the Russian population and what they're thinking?
Luba,
Yes. First of all, I want all Western society to understand that Russian society doesn't changes for ages, for hundreds of years. How do you want and how can you imagine to change it in 1 or 10 years? By explanations, by saying, oh, we will give you money for independent media. It doesn't work in Russia. We just have to understand it. See? In the first days of war, I was so naive that I tried to influence in Russian society. What I did, because I had no work during first two months because I'm on corruption topics, you see. And so what I did, I went to Google Maps and added photos with crashed Russian tanks and dead Russian soldiers on most popular locations in Russia, in Moscow, St. Petersburg, like McDonald's, like they said that we have no losses. Okay, oh, this is the truth. This is your dead soldier. Okay, I put it 13,000 of photos during first 2 weeks. I was very inspired, yes. Then what I did, I wrote it SMSs to mobile phones of top officers of FSB. So I sent 300 SMSs from special program with very, how to say it, politely. So
With some criticism.
With some criticism, yes. Trying to explain them that they will lose in this war. Also, I was trying to talk to Russian journalists, but I failed. And I understood that I don't want to spend my strength, my energy for such things that will not help. You see? Just look at the statistics. More than 80% of Russians support Putin. They all are involved in this war. They want this war. Putin, that's not a problem about Putin. It's Putin does what his people wants him to do. You see, if he didn't have the support, he wouldn't start this war. But In result, even right now, when 130 Russian soldiers are dead, do you see the massive actions in Russia, like in every village, in every city, stop the war, stop the war? No, we see other pictures. We see how in like Siberia, in the village with population of 200 people, a woman takes pelmeni, you know what's pelmeni? Yes, pelmeni from local authorities, and saying, thank you so much for pelmeni. My son is dead, but at last I have pelmeni. You see? How you, democratic society, can imagine the same situation in your country? When your son is dead, you went to the war to another country, and you the governments take you pelmeni, and you are not angry on governments, but you are happy. And this is honor for you that your son is dead. You see, there is French. Well, there is a huge gap between us, European society, and Russians. It's like it's such depth that you can see the end of it. You see, so don't try to jump this distance, because you will go there. You see. Use your energy in more useful way. Speak with Ukrainians, speak with Ukrainian society, help us to win. Talking to Russians has no reason.
Thank you. I think we've probably run out of time for this, but we're going to be here for a while. So please chat, engage with the stakeholders. And is that right? Am I right?
Yes, if I may add, if you decide to stay for coffee and cookies, please do so. And as Tom mentioned at the beginning, the cohort comprises 11 outstanding fellows. I will just give you a sneak peek of what you can talk to them about, because Luba and Anna are just two shining examples of stories that we can offer. But with us today is Igor, who is an expert on open source data in Ukraine and digitalization. Alexei and Victor will be happy to talk you like in depth about Prozoro and procurement. We have Gleb, who is an expert on tracking Russian assets in Ukraine, and many more investigative journalists also from the regions. So please do take this opportunity to chat with them and ask questions and learn more. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everyone.